I'm Jim Collison and live from the Gallup studios here in Omaha, Nebraska. This is Gallup's Theme Thursday, Season 3, recorded on August 3rd, 2017. Theme Thursday is a webcast series that dives deep into the CliftonStrengths themes, one theme at a time, and today's theme is Includer. If you have questions, comments, or contributions during this webcast, we do have a live chat room that's available for you right below the main video window. If you just look down there, right there. Yeah, there's a chat room down there. If you're not logged into it, bottom left-hand corner, it says log in. Choose that. Choose the guest account. Put your name in where it says guest. Take those numbers out. Put your name in there so we know who you are and hit submit. Best way to get your questions in live. There's 11 or so out there in the chat room and 16 or so watching live. So 5 of you have not logged into the chat room. We'd love to have you do that to join us. If you're listening to the recorded version or have questions about custom strengths coaching solutions for small, medium, or large organizations, send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. Don't forget to visit the Gallup Strength Center, just gallupstrengthcenter.com for all your CliftonStrengths coaching resources and training needs. And don't forget you can catch the video and now downloadable audio for offline listening. We call that podcasting, by the way. If you want to do that off your phone, off your device, on your computer, we pretty much provide every way available known to man to listen to these, so no excuse. Recapture them in time you're in a car, in a train, on a plane, some of those types of things. We'd love to have you do that. Every option is available on our coach's blog. Actually, lots of resources out there as well. Coaching.gallup.com. Maika Leibbrandt is our host today. Maika is a workplace consultant here at Gallup. And man, Maika, this week I have been taking some serious heat for calling you my favorite.
From who? I'll fight
my
them.
Gosh, your compadres here at Gallup have been giving me some heat, but it's true. Welcome to
Tell
another
them just
Thursday.
to woo you harder.
Yeah, maybe that's right. Maybe I just need to tell them to work harder. Speaking of working hard, we have we've got some great stuff to cover with Includer today, and hopefully everyone's downloaded their companion guide. We've got a guest with us, but let's dive into Includer.
Excellent. So today we get to talk about Includer. I can't wait to get to our guest. Luke is one of my favorite, gonna take some heat. Woo! My favorite Includers, a fantastic strengths advocate and a great business leader. But before we get to Luke, let's talk about Includer. So Includer is a fantastic theme. Again, we are making our way through the relationship building category when you think about what do they look like as leadership themes. When you think about Includer, we think about stretching the circle wider. If Includer was a kid on the playground, it's the one who notices the other kid who's not playing, goes over and grabs their hand and brings them into the game. And it's not just an action, it really is a philosophy under which people with high Includer orient their life. A couple things I like to highlight in the long definition, which is at the top of your companion guide if you're following along. If you're an Includer, you actively avoid groups that exclude other people. It's not just about being the person who includes, it's also about being pretty aware of exclusion. You're an instinctively accepting person, and your accepting nature, here's where it's different from individualization. It doesn't come from necessarily a belief that each of us is different and special. Instead, Includer comes from a belief that fundamentally we're all the same, that we are all equally important, and that no one should be ignored. Each of us should feel included, feel heard, feel seen. That's the least that we all deserve. What a beautiful theme. When you think about it, within that relationship building domain, again, the domain is about those themes where people lead by being the glue that holds a team together, by being those themes that help us understand that together we can get more done than we can as individuals. So let's talk about what does Includer look like as a leader. If as an individual, Includer is about just bringing other people and making them feel part of the group, as a leader, Includer might be about making people feel part of a cause. So that could be your employees, your customers, your suppliers. It can also look very cerebral, very thought-driven in leaders, being able to question who will this decision affect? How will your message be received? It's inclusive and including, both an action and a mindset. People with high Includer, leaders with high Includer might be able to imagine how can you affect your organization on both fronts? How can you help the mindset as well as the action be more inclusive? It may be from asking considerate questions that push other people to think more inclusively, to think bigger. It might also come from just extending hospitality to people, being the person who literally shakes the hand of other organizations or of other partners. Think about also Includer as what could help you build a more diverse or inclusive leadership pipeline. Understand that if you lead with includer, you see people that others may not notice. So think about that as an opportunity to be a builder and a developer of talent and potential through what it is that you're noticing. Also, give other people a little bit of grace if they don't see it. I think includer has a little bit more like an extra pair of glasses compared to other themes that allow you to see things that other people might ignore. And you can understand when you realize you have includer and other people don't, that maybe that ignoring isn't intentional. So there might be a little bit of forgiveness that's necessary with includer when you're working with people who don't have it. See it rather than rather than a bone of contention, see that as a gift that you can bring to a partnership. The last thing I want to say about includer before we look at our 4 domains of leadership is a quote from someone named Verna Myers. And it says, diversity is being asked to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance. I love that quote because I think it helps us really see that includer isn't just the thought or the action. It is, let's take this and let's really make it meaningful. Let's not just send you the invitation. Let's help this experience become part of who you are. So we've got our 4 needs of followers finally. A leader with includer might build trust by building careful attention to confidentiality. Be a voice for all. Think about being an advocate, standing up for, being somebody who can be a voice for every party, but also be that shoulder for one person at a time. A leader with includer might show compassion by saying yes every single day to people who reach out to you. You might exhibit more welcoming emotion than you know. You might be a little bit more hospitable than even you know, which will probably attract people to you. Practice that, grow that as a talent, and think about leveraging it by building upon it with strength, with knowledge, with skill. And one of those things you can practice is making sure that every single day you are reaching back out to the people who are reaching to you. A leader with includer might build stability by thinking about intentionally leveraging or creating better networks for your team or your organization. Make partnerships outside of the typical circles. That might mean very easily professionally joining organizations that don't have quite as much of an obvious connection to yours. It also might mean looking for other ways that you can get involved with recruiting. It also might mean expanding your community involvement of your organization. And finally, a leader with includer could build hope by being an advocate for those who might be excluded and doing it pretty intentionally. Think about illustrating the future benefit of inclusion through the way that you speak to people, through what you stand up for, through ways of working that you know are going to be more inclusive. In many cases, this might be small tweaks in a plan that other people didn't notice that make the entire plan or the entire initiative more welcoming, more palatable to a larger group of people. Again, in a leader, includer might be a little bit more about how we think about things. So it might be that you want to make sure that every policy that you have doesn't exclude certain groups of people, faith, religion, gender, age, race. That might be something that you really think about kind of on paper, more strategically. It also might mean that it is just making sure that you can reach a wider audience. But think about, as you're doing that, how you can use that to build hope by helping people see the benefit of it. It's not just a policy that you need to follow because it's the right thing to do. You can use that as a leverage of hope by helping people see how the future is better when we include people. So that's my quick introduction to this beautiful theme. I hope we've helped you fall in love with it a little bit. If we haven't, I'm positive that our guest will do that with us. I'd like to introduce and bring to the program Luke Ramsay. Luke, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, Luke, just to kick things off, could you tell us just a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. Though today's kind of a weird day, so I'm literally packing up this office that I'm in today. For the past 4.5 years, I've worked for an economic development agency in Southeast Kentucky. I run a small business incubator, so I'm working with people who are trying to start businesses, trying to find employment in a region that has been pretty depressed economically for a long time. And then I'm transitioning today from here to 2 different things. One is I'm going to go work for the University of Kentucky doing similar sorts of work, but statewide. but I'll also be launching in a very official way my own firm, People Engineers, where I do coaching and consulting. But I'm a Kentucky native. I've been here my entire life, born and bred here. And if you pick up a little bit of an accent, that's okay.
We appreciate you, accent and all. Luke, what does includer mean for you? How does it show up in your life?
Well, as you were just talking, there was a couple things that jumped to mind that really I've come to realize is a really inherent part of me. And that is that I tend to root for the underdog. It doesn't matter where I personally find values or beliefs. If I'm in a room with a group of people who share the same values that I do, and there tends to be a pile-on to the opposing view, I tend to kind of insert myself and defend a new position, even if it's not one that I necessarily agree with. And you and I talked about this the other day, that I see a lot of blends between my top 5. And so woo and includer tend to show up really, really well together for me. And so if I'm at the summit a couple weeks ago, making the rounds, trying to connect with as many people, it's not just about making new friends, but it's about finding new connections, finding people who may not have connected already within the organization and within the community at large, and trying to help them find those connections.
It's cool to think about the dynamics between woo and includer. It's got a little bit more of a servanthood to it than just woo by itself.
Yeah. It is really powerful, especially in those large communities. Those two together, because the includer in me wants to literally kind of find the peripheral of a group of people, and you can spot them really quickly, the folks who just haven't integrated yet. And I like to find ways for those people to integrate. It helps me feel good. It helps them become more productive. It helps me become more productive.
Is this something you think about? Like, do you notice who's excluded and then go to a drawing board and come up with a plan to include them, or do you just jump in?
No, yeah, it's pretty natural. And for a long time, I kind of thought that there was a shyness about me, which is kind of hard to believe when you've got woo at number 2 and includer at number 5. There's these things that are just part of me that you would not associate with shyness. And so I think for a long time, I assumed it was shyness. I thought I was uncomfortable with large crowds, but as I've matured and kind of explored myself, I've realized that is trying to connect with people who were on the outskirts for them, less for protection for me, but more to engage with people who weren't engaged already.
Maika, there's some question, and Luke, we want to ask this from your opinion, and I think, Maika, you alluded to it in your opening bit there about the difference between includer and individualization. And so, Luke, as you think about that for you, can you kind of contrast those two and how that works in your world?
So to me, individualization can be very very isolating. It can be very cerebral. You can actually live within yourself and just recognize the differences in people, and appreciate that and really enjoy that knowledge. Includer almost requires engagement with people. It's more of an extroverted theme. Individualization can be a little bit more introverted.
I like that, and it's so funny that you ask, because as Luke and I were doing our prep call, I found myself describing includer in a way that I thought sounded a lot like individualization. I think the relationship that both of those themes have with diversity maybe is where it's different. Individualization is drawn to it for the sake of what the difference is, and sees the beauty in difference. Includer, I think, deals with the fallout of diversity. So thinking about if diversity leads to people being excluded, if diversity leads to adversity, includer sweeps in. It's an opportunity for includer. It's a motivation for individualization. Luke, would you say that's fair?
Yeah, that's good. That's absolutely true.
Luke, you're in a role where you're working with people, entrepreneurs in this case. How do you use that how do you personally in your leadership role, since that's what we're talking about, how do you use that to your advantage for their advantage. So when you're working with them, how does that come out so you can help make them more productive?
Yeah, so I would say it shows up really kind of two ways. So entrepreneurs are almost by nature, the vast majority of them are in that really super early stage where they've got an idea. Maybe they've just started something that they're trying to build. And so they tend to, at least in this region, they tend to fall into the background of a community. They're trying to do something new and innovative, and they haven't quite figured out how to build a market, how to build support. And so I really enjoy kind of going through communities and digging those folks out, because they need to be more exposed. Their ideas need to be exposed. So that helps me a lot, finding those people and finding those great ideas. On the flip side, how does it help them? I really believe in my ability to connect those folks to the resources that would help them the most. So it may be an investor, it may be a partner, it may be an engineer, it could be any number of things, and helping them connect with folks who they may have seen as unavailable is something that really adds value to them. And the only way that can happen is by this kind of categorization of who's on the outside, who's on the inside for me. So I try and build those bridges for them and for myself.
Luke, do you remember Includer showing up your whole life?
Yeah, I think I've told this story a couple times recently, but I think if you were to take the 34 themes and set them down in front of my parents and said, you know, which of these is Luke at 5, 6, 7 years old, they would have picked out Includer first, because I did tend to do that. You know, I connected with students and classmates who were the outsiders and who seemed just lonely, seemed to not have a social network of any sort, and I tended to gravitate towards them and become their social network. And I don't think it was particularly well developed at that age, so the network stayed pretty exclusive, kind of two people. But as I've gotten older, I tend to pull people into larger networks for their sake.
That's a really cool understanding of that, the maturity of Includers. You used to pull them in and keep it exclusive, and now you can pull and connect.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the woo part certainly is reflected more as I've matured. Relator was probably more of an early stage for me. Relator is still pretty high for me. Don't ask me what number it is because I don't remember. But you know, Relator is a theme that, if I look back in those days, Includer and Relator went really, really well hand in hand. Now I think Includer and Woo go really, really well hand in hand.
Excellent. I want to jump on a question here from Carol in the chat room. She says, I'm curious as to the differences between Includer and connectedness. Does one or the other create networking connections? Connectedness, I think I've heard a lot of misconceptions around lately, perhaps because of the name. Connectedness is not so much about connecting people to people. It really is about understanding that everything happens for a reason, feeling like there is maybe invisible connections of purpose between events and between people. But it is more about, hey, we're here for a reason. There's a bigger plan. This was meant to be. I think Luke's combination of Woo and Includer that he's describing right now is probably going to be what makes him a great connector of people. When you think about that, if you think about the term networking being used in thinking about bringing outsiders in, that's the Includer part. Woo is probably making people feel comfortable instantly and winning them over, helping them like you. That combination of Woo and Includer sounds like you are becoming a connector of people, being able to take somebody's experience and expand upon it by helping them know other people, helping them make those, shake those hands, make those relationships and start it, and then kind of get out of it. My question for you then, Luke, is do you feel like you need to stay in those relationships in order to make sure that people are still included, or is there some time where you kind of back off and let it have its own life?
Well, that's interesting, and that thought has been coming to mind lately. So some of my classmates from the accelerated course from 2 years ago, they were with me in DC, or in Omaha for the summit. And I think they saw a different side of me because I really do, at that sort of event, I'm all over the place, and I'm meeting people. And what kind of a personal mantra for myself is I don't let people go. And so I grab people, I get to know people, but I have a really hard time saying that they're not part of my life anymore. And so I can pick up the phone 2-3 years later and call somebody and really feel like I picked up right where I left off. And I think that's probably the includer kicking in. I think that the includer says it doesn't matter how far in the past that relationship was, they are still part of the circle. And so, yeah, I think the ability to hang on to people is very, very much a part of includer. I don't feel a responsibility to maintain a depth of relationship that I do at a certain particular time in my life, but the tethering is still there constantly.
Great word, tethering. I love that. That's very cool, and probably an extension that includer brings to Woo that Woo wouldn't have on its own. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I was listening to this episode from last season or maybe the season before, and I think it was you, Jim, who was talking about, you have Woo in your top 5 and Woo and includer, like how those two meld together, and I don't see how they don't meld together, how they can't operate in the same way, which is fascinating. What component do the various themes bring to each other?
Luke, I like that conversation, because for me, I'm not always thinking. I think it somehow comes like, what are you thinking about as you're we talk about Woo and includer. What are we thinking about when we're in Woo mode? And I think for you naturally gravitate towards the thought process of, is everybody coming along with us at this point? And I don't. I am like, hey, if we miss people along the way, well, sorry.
Yeah.
We're moving. And so it's just a different nuance.
Sure, absolutely.
So I have to partner, especially in leadership, I have to partner with people who I know, either from a responsibility standpoint or from an includer standpoint, will make sure I'm pulling people, I'm getting everybody, because I will take off. And, if you didn't get there. So it's interesting. I think that's a great thought. And that's, as we understand ourselves as leaders, what are those areas that we know we're going to need to shore up and that we can't? It just doesn't matter how many times I think about it, how many notes I write to myself, how many, entries I put in my Franklin planner. Just doesn't matter what I do there. It's not natural to me, and it is to you. And so we could, from a leadership standpoint, you got that covered. I would need somebody to kind of help me out.
Sure.
Luke, when you think about partnership, so you as a leader, you probably have some great partners who have strengths that you don't have, and equally those people who come to you for your includer. What does it look like when somebody's asking to borrow your includer, or how do you feel like it really benefits others in a partnership?
Well, I love it. It's a fantastic opportunity for me. If somebody needs a connection, that's one of my favorite parts of this job is helping people connect with each other. And so working with entrepreneurs, this happens a lot. Somebody creates an idea in isolation, and if they don't have some of those relationship building themes, strategic thinking themes, they tend to have a hard time finding the right partners to help move that idea from idea to production, to completion, to a viable product. And so I love using that theme for myself, because I keep this mental Rolodex of people and resources. And I've gotten pretty good about getting strategic about how I use includer, so that it's not something that is just kind of a shotgun approach to connecting people. It's targeted, so that if entrepreneur number 1 needs something, I don't go to every angel investor or every venture fund and say, help me fund this idea. I go to the ones who I know share a common vision, who would be open to that sort of technology, that sort of concept. And so it's much more strategic for me at this point.
I love that. Again, probably a maturity of includer is how purposeful and intentional can it get. That's fantastic.
There is a little point in there, though. You mentioned this, Luke, where you're using it in a way that could look like strategic, and yet it's very much a function of your includer. And I don't know if that matters. I think sometimes in the strengths community, we try and figure that out, and it's like, okay, let's stop wasting time figuring out the name, and let's figure out how to use it in a way.
Yep.
I mean, I love the fact that you're like, hey, if I can quickly and efficiently get my people, and I think you would say that they are your peeps, right?
Oh yeah.
To
Absolutely.
the right investors, then we are cutting down on inefficiencies and we're getting the right funding in the right places. I mean, I really love the fact, like, at some point, hey, let's stop talking about what it is and let's move this into some really impactful ways of making sure people are taken care of. So I love that conversation, because I think sometimes we'll dig in a little too deep trying to figure out exactly what it is. And I love how you've identified, like, I have this particular skill to get them to angel investors, but not all of them, just the right ones. Love that.
Right. And it becomes, to kind of continue that conversation, Maika, I think one of the uses of Includer is especially in a business or an organizational standpoint, is it becomes a really nice tool in terms of delegation of duties, because the Rolodex doesn't stop at names and locations. It includes skills, talents, interests, and so I can connect people with a particular job within an organization that needs to be done that may resonate more with them, at least on a skill level, but also on an interest level. And so it becomes very useful as a way to kind of direct where work happens.
Sounds like a lot of work. Are you? Is it something that you're constantly doing? Does it take a lot of effort?
I don't write anything down, so I don't know how much of it is actually living in my head and how much of it is just happening on the fly. So no, it doesn't feel like work to me at all. It feels like just doing the right thing almost.
I hope everybody caught that reaction, because honestly, for people without Includer to do something that thoughtful, that focused, that intentional, that sort of making the circle wider in a strategic way, it would feel like work. And you know what? We would have to write it down. But it's probably a great clue to talent, in that it's just in how you behave and who you are, and your brain instantly goes there.
Sure.
It's not like you need an assistant who's making these connections for you. Go talk to Maika and she'll set you up with the Rolodex. It's more embedded.
I one of my favorite things, and this is some of my old coworkers hated me for this, or kind of despised people like me, because I love airplanes, and I love airplanes because I get to meet new people sitting next to me on the airplane, which these days just about everybody puts on headphones and kind of isolates themselves, which is totally fine. But if I find that person that I sit next to, I love to play the game of how do we know each other. It's kind of the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon sort of concept. Where can we make those connections so that I can draw lines, and the circle is not is not a circle by itself. The circle is really a spider web of people and points, and they're connected in various places. And so finding ways that people connect with each other is a lot of fun. And I just remember clues about individuals that I may fast forward to another plane and all of a sudden go, wait a second, you're from Kalamazoo, or you're from Timbuktu, wherever, and help myself kind of make some connections and see if they know somebody that I know, and that's just something I really enjoy doing, that drives some people nuts.
But what I love, the Includer piece that I love about it, is that there's no real closed gates. It's not like this person's going to stay in this little network over here. There's a real open-mindedness of where those connections could be.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a lot of fun to kind of break down some of those barriers that may exist already, whether it's geographic, whether it is religion, whether it's race, whether it is social sphere, whatever it is, breaking down those barriers to build the circle even wider is a lot of fun. And it's probably kind of going back to what you were talking about earlier, of this diversification process that Includer has, and it really is blending a lot of people together in ways that they may not have seen before.
So you can do that by being inclusive yourself, talking to everybody on the plane.
Mm-hmm.
How do you help other people break down those barriers?
Well, sometimes I think I've used this term already, but this bridge concept is I serve as a bridge, and so some folks just are intimidated by others. Maybe they just don't know how to integrate with a new community, how to meet new people, whatever it is. They have a hard time getting off of their island. And so I create a bridge that allows them to cross from one island to another. And that's something that takes a very, very involved part on my part. I have to actually sometimes physically take them from one place to another to introduce them to a new circle. Sometimes it's an email, sometimes it's a phone call, sometimes, who knows, it could be all sorts of different things. But the point is that I'm the one who's making that bridge. And once I'm comfortable with the fact that bridge is established, and those islands have kind of crossed over a little bit, I feel totally fine moving on and letting that relationship flourish in its own sort of way and moving on to the next project.
Our friend Kurt Leesfeld was a big fan of bridges. And I have connectedness number 6, and I'm sitting here going, there's a reason that you just said, I am a bridge. That's pretty cool.
Hey, in the context of that bridge metaphor, Luke, that you're using, and Maika mentioned in kind of her opening segment about confidentiality, how important does that play in these relationships that you make? And I think as leaders, we have this extra burden for confidentiality. How does that play in your relationships, especially as you're thinking about these entrepreneurs? Are you thinking about that?
Less so. I mean, it is definitely something that I have to be aware of, and I have to remind myself to be aware of it pretty frequently, because my tendency is to just jump in and say, this guy's got this great idea that you should be a part of, and sometimes that works. I have not been caught yet with that being a negative, but I'm just waiting for the day that somebody says, oh, Luke, you really shouldn't have said that because you've now busted my patent, that sort of thing. It's not happened yet. I hope it never happens, but I do have to remind myself that confidentiality is important, and privacy is important, and the includer nature is to kind of be sharing everywhere.
Yeah, and you like me have that curse of woo communication, and I think sometimes that fights against confidentiality. It's a struggle. It can be, right?
Yeah.
So themes around us influence that. So, but it can be a real struggle, and so there are things as we think about including, because you're bringing people in and they trust you. They say things to you, or they give you the right to be a part of their life, and I think it's really, really important as leaders we keep.
Absolutely, and I do think that is a component of includer that I am acutely aware of the fact that I don't want to push anybody outside the circle. The flip side of building the circle larger is that you could push people outside, and so things like losing that trust, losing that confidentiality pushes people outside of the circle, or it risks that. And so there may be a component of being aware of confidentiality that is very includer, that is saying, let's make sure that we don't do something that is going to push somebody outside.
That's great. It sounds like it's a pretty influential theme in that way of let's make sure we don't, or let's make sure we do this in the right way. Sure. How do you do that by just calling people out when they're being exclusive?
Yeah, sometimes I think what I mentioned earlier on of kind of defending the underdog happens. So it's this may be a bit of woo blending in, but if I hear conversation that is targeted at demeaning or excluding somebody else, I usually don't call people out. It's not that abrupt, but it is. I do bring attention to the fact that there's some exclusion going on by kind of pointing out the positives of another position and pointing out the positives of individuals who are being pushed out. And so it's much more subtle, I think, than calling people out directly. But it ends up serving the same purpose. May take a little bit longer.
That's how woo calls people out.
Yeah, maybe so. Maybe so.
You will correct your behavior and you'll like me for it.
That's not true at all, Maika.
I'm still struggling with how to deal with really bad customer service last week and be wooey. You know, I want to call you out and I want you to hang up the phone thinking it was a good experience.
Yeah, my wife.
Go
ahead, please. No, please.
I was just going to ask, what does Includer look like outside of business for you? How's it show up in your personal life?
Well, I have a fairly large social circle. My Facebook page is, I forget what the number is at this point, and it's not. I don't collect people for the numerical status. It was just recently somebody pointed out like how large it had gotten, and I can identify where I know or how I know just about everybody on that list. And so my social circle is pretty big. Just before my wife and I met, so this was right after college. I had a full-time job, but it was 9 to 5, single, had an apartment, and I realized when my wife and I met and we started spending more time together, how much my social calendar was full, and it was just hopping from group to group to group. There was never a night of the week that I wasn't doing something with somebody, and it was a different group every night. And that's not popularity. That was just wanting to get to know as many people as possible and get to know talents anywhere that they existed, getting to know interests, getting to know passions. It was fantastic to build that circle in a really rapid sort of way. For my wife's, I think it was her 25th birthday, we had this tiny little farm way up on the top of a hill. It was almost impossible to get to, and I wanted to throw her a surprise birthday party. So big bonfire, and had everybody show up. I had no idea how many people I had invited, and so as we pulled in, we're going up the hill, and my wife says, "Why are all those people at our farm?" Just completely oblivious to the fact that it was her birthday. And when we started counting, it was about 50 people or so. And I thought, this is awesome that these are people from church. These are people from our social lives. This is all over the place. And I really loved it. It was a lot of fun to realize that we knew those people, that we knew all those folks, and that they had come out to support her and celebrate her.
That's fantastic. I love that. And that you got people not just to come to a party, but to drive to the top of a hill in a place that's hard to find.
Yeah. And difficult to get to, sure.
Does Includer ever get in the way? Can the circle ever be too big?
Yeah. Same, a different party, but same sort of scenario. This, again, I don't think she's watching, so she may have to watch this in replay. When my wife and I had just met, there was definitely some chemistry already. We were very interested in each other, but I had thrown another another bonfire party, and I'd invited a ton of people from different circles in my life to come to this party, and I spent my entire evening going from group to group to group, making sure that everybody felt welcome. But the downside was that my time was spent, and I was pretty thin. There wasn't a whole lot of time with each group, and especially with this gal who I wanted to spend a whole lot of time with, she took great offense to that, and it can get in the way. Absolutely, it creates a bit of a it spreads you thin.
What do you feel like you need in order to make sure it stays in that good space?
Well, the strategy part has become very big. So knowing how to balance the connectedness with individuals and not letting those relationships drop completely, but maintaining enough of a relationship so that I do feel comfortable calling and kind of striking up where that relationship left off. At the same time, knowing where the majority of my time needs to be spent. So I've got 3 small kids now. My tendency is to be all over the place, involved with other families, involved with other people, but I still, my priority is spending time with my kids. and helping them grow and get to know their dad and just, being very much a part of their lives. So I have to be strategic. This is a time where includer, at least during home time, has to be minimized instead of embellished.
That's excellent. Maybe it's about using that includer to help your kids' circles get bigger versus your own.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and trying to figure out how to do that and still respect and enjoy their talents at the same time.
Yeah. I want to talk, we alluded it to those 4 needs to followers before, but I'm just curious, out of stability, hope, compassion, and trust, is there one that you feel like is more obviously tethered to includer?
You cut out just for a second. Can you repeat that question?
Yeah, out of those 4 needs of followers, is there one that stands out to you more as being more connected to includer? Stability, hope, compassion, or trust?
I think that compassion has always been a big part of includer. I think that, again, that conversation of forgiveness at the beginning of this webinar, understanding that there needs to be some forgiveness for those who don't get includer, and giving them some grace. I think part of that is tied to that compassion piece that we've got to understand how to recognize other people's positions and beliefs and values, and still maintain our own position strongly within ourselves. And so to me, that's all tied up in compassion, the understanding that they have something, and that they believe very strongly in something that I may not. And so working within myself, working with others to help kind of come around and build up that individual. So to me, compassion definitely jumps out.
Yeah, I see that. I've been told that as we were doing the research for strengths-based leadership that led to those 4 needs of followers, that originally compassion was the word love. And the way you describe includer certainly sounds like a lot of love. Yeah,
I believe that very much.
It's Luke, you said something in there that really sets well with me, in that you have to have some grace for those of us who don't have it, because it can look frustrating from the outside in when you're following a leader who is moving forward. I mentioned this, and maybe not thinking about everyone. And that seems very disrespectful, I think, to you. When we think, using this love analogy, like, you don't love these people like I do.
Yeah, right.
And you should, right? And this is, I think, one of those areas where this can be tough in leadership, especially working with leaders who have other themes, and they're pushing forward another, Maya Ranger Woo wants to just keep pushing forward, of activator, keep pushing forward. I think people will come along and get it as they go, but you're hanging out with me and you're like, why don't you care more? And
I've never said that, Jim.
Everybody says that about you, Jim.
True. It's true. But Luke, don't you feel like as you're working in that, that's something you have to be, is what you're saying, do you have to be careful of that and deploy some grace in those areas?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm aware enough to know that this is not just includer. This is just kind of social, geographic, physical awareness that I was giving Maika this example yesterday, that so I manage this facility. I've got a 10,000 square foot incubator that I manage, and we have another facility that is kind of operations. That's where everybody else operates out of. I've got exposure to maintenance people, janitors, people who are on the ground in the building in a way that nobody else is. They are familiar with a high degree of the workings of that building. And so, but there's a big gap between those who are the decision makers for the facility and the finances, and these people who are acutely aware of the needs of the building. And so I have to be cautious about how I present those needs to the powers that be, and make sure that I'm not giving them grief and not judging them for being unaware of that, unaware of those needs. And so, again, coming back to this bridge concept, I have to be sensitive about how I bridge that gap between the janitor and the CEO.
Do you see a gap? Or is it more that there isn't one to you and you need to help other people not see
No,
it?
I definitely see a gap. I mean, there are individuals who are in leadership who of various organizations that I've been a part of who are better at narrowing the gap themselves. In fact, the organization that I worked for when I was exposed to StrengthsFinder the first time, that executive director was just fantastic at understanding that his entire team had value to add to the conversation, and he was very mature about it. It was not the sort of case where everybody needed to be heard every time. In fact, he made some very strategic decisions on how to get input from his staff that just made it more efficient. But then there's other organizations where the gap is huge, and I'm acutely aware of the fact that the gap is there, and that ties in with what Jim was asking. Showing grace when that gap is blind to some is fine. It takes work. It takes more time. It's a little bit more complicated, but it's okay. It's necessary. Sometimes it's just invisible, and so kind of uncovering those gaps is part of my job.
Excellent. So, Luke, if you were advising other leaders with Includer, what would you want them to know?
Other leaders with Includer. Yeah, I think the getting to know a team is huge. I don't care how large the organization is. Understanding who's on your team is a really big piece. I used to think, so two jobs ago, I worked for an agricultural bank. And this agricultural bank was made up of, had a board of farmers, and of course there was a bunch of financiers. And I came to work there, and I was able to get a position that got me an audience with the board fairly frequently. And I always felt weird. This was right out of college. I felt very weird. I was not a farmer and was not a financier, so I didn't really know what place I played in that group. And so I felt like very much the outcast at that table. Fast forward a little bit, and as I got a little bit more confident, I realized, wait, I am a weirdo, but I actually have something to add to this conversation because these guys all look the same, right? Fast forward now to kind of exploring myself through strengths. I'm now more aware that I am a weirdo, but everybody else at the table was also a weirdo, and we all had something really, really impactful to add to the conversation. And so for leaders, like understanding that yes, there may be some weirdos in your organization, but guess what? Those weirdos have something really valuable to add to the overall mission, to the overall value of the organization.
Maika had mentioned, Luke, in the pre-part about this idea of advocating for. In that scenario, do you feel like as you got to know them, you became a better advocate for them?
For the board members?
Yeah, for the other board members. I mean, you're asking kind of a reason why they had you on there. In
that role, not so much. I think I was still a little bit peripheral, but I think the question's still a good one, and it's a really it can be a really powerful piece. Advocacy is huge. I think for Includer, advocacy is almost a synonymous term. If it's an includer for other members within the same conversation, or whether it's an advocate for those who are outside the conversation who need to be part of it, yeah, I mean, when it boils down to it, it's advocacy. It is part of being an includer.
Yeah, I know some groups will reach out. They're not good at this. Groups don't have, they may not have a champion inside their group, and looking for someone who has that ability to be an advocate, especially in a board situation or a nonprofit, I think it's really, really important. And I think this is one of those areas we need to look for that. Like, we need to go out and find someone to say, hey, who is going to be our team advocate? Who is going to not only advocate for us, but be an advocate for our mission, our purpose, what we're doing.
Right.
And that's an incredible superpower of Includer, right? I mean, what you think so?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, the blend of understanding the mission, understanding the passion, understanding the values of the organization, and advocating for it on the outside, but then also becoming almost a filter would be one way to look at it, between the decision makers who are understandably very, very busy and really, depending on the size of the organization, may not have the time to get to know intimately everybody on their team. The includer can oftentimes serve as a filter to accept everyone who needs their ideas and needs their thoughts heard, and then filter it in a way that makes sure that those ideas are shared in an efficient and effective way to the decision makers.
Yeah, and that's good. Maika, we are about out of time. We want to include everybody in on this, but we're about out of time. And any final thoughts or questions, Maika, as we kind of bring this in for landing?
The last two words that Luke just used were so powerful. You know, he talks about efficiency and effectiveness. Includer isn't just about making people feel good. Just like any of these themes aren't just about building relationships or thinking or doing or influencing. I love that idea of the boardroom value of includer, because it's certainly there. And Luke, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing your love for this theme in a way that helps us see all the really powerful dimensions of it, and for being such a great steward of strengths in your professional life as well as your daily life outside of work. So thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me. This has been fun.
Luke, great to have you. Good to see you at the summit as well. I hope we get to do that again next year. And
I hope so.
I think no, we did a theme Thursday last week, but it always is always great to see everybody at the summit, and we appreciate you guys coming out. Luke, thanks for saying yes today to be with us.
Yeah,
we'll remind everyone to take full advantage of all the resources we have available at the Gallup Strength Center, just gallupstrengthcenter.com. Send us your questions or comments if you'd like to be a guest blogger. We do take those as well. We're looking for folks who have 400 to 600 words or so, want to say something around our strengths environment. We'd love to have those to you. If you put them in an email, send them to coaching@gallup.com, put guest blogger in the subject line, that'll make its way to Maika, and we can consider that for our coaches blog. If you haven't been out there in a while, you might want to head back out. I'm actually days away from launching some new resources for you, actually redesigned resources available for you. We're hoping to have those out this weekend. Check it out. It's all at our coaches blog, coaching.gallup.com. If you're interested in becoming a Gallup certified strengths coach, you can see a list of all our courses, and we have a whole bunch of courses coming out this fall that you're going to want to stay on top of. So you might want to head out to our courses site. Super simple, courses.gallup.com is the way to get out there. And again, if you have any questions around those, you can send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. If you found this helpful, and I hope you would, we'd ask that you'd share it. I want to thank everyone for coming out today. And with that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.